Hello, this video is going to review how to create some interactivity in your live synchronous sessions that you're having with your students. Live synchronous sessions are ones that you use for things like Zoom, Blackboard Ultra, Skype, GoToMeeting, Google Meet, all those different ones that you might use to meet live with your students. So the prerequisite to this video is you do want to know a little bit about how to use those tools. You want to know how to create the session, how to log into the session, how to turn your audio on and off, all of that kind of stuff. You want to have some basic understanding of it. But in this video, we're going to talk about 3 types of strategies you can use to add in that interactivity. One is to use polling, which most live web conferencing systems that allow you to meet synchronously with your students does have a polling feature built in. The other one is using some PowerPoint or whiteboard interactives, which I have some samples that you can use, as well as creating breakout groups for your students to meet into smaller groups within the session. So first, let's look at polling. So you can do 2 types of polling questions. The first set are survey type questions. So they're things like, how do you feel about this topic? What have you learned before about this topic? Number 1, did you do the background reading from this topic? If you took a test about this topic, how well do you think you would score? So again, there's not right or wrong answers on this. You're just getting some survey data from your students. And based upon how they answer, you can go forth with your lesson. So if everyone feels really good about this topic, they say that they've learned a lot about the topic before, they say if they took a test on the topic they would score well, that's positive information. At the end of the lesson, if they voted that they feel like they would be able to do well and if they took a test on this topic, then that's a great thing. So it's more survey type questions. Another way that you can use polling is to actually ask content questions. I would encourage you to do that every couple of slides to check their understanding. So maybe every 3 to 5 slides you build in a poll where they ask a question. You ask a question and they actually have to answer with the correct answer. And then what you can do is you're able to show the students a graph of how the students answered, how everybody else in the course answered, and you're able to look at each of those answer choices and have students explain why it's right or wrong. So B's the correct answer. Most people said B, but a couple of people said A and C. Let's talk about why people would have said A and C and what misconceptions are there. Nobody said D. Let's talk about why we knew D wasn't the correct answer. So more than just getting information for yourself and seeing if people are answering it correctly, it's also a great way to kind of have discussions and pick apart each of the options and define, let the students help you define how they're right or wrong. So let's look at some of these pollings in action. So this is what the poll would look like when you get finished with it. So maybe the question is, what is the subject of this sentence? The dog ran fast. So the answer choices are fast, ran, and dog. And the students vote, and I'm given this graph. So looking at this graph, I know that most people said the dog, which is the correct answer, which is great. I noticed that some people said ran and some people said fast. So I might say, okay, if anybody said fast, tell me why that's incorrect. Or someone who didn't say fast, tell me why it's incorrect. Tell me why ran is incorrect, and then tell me why dog is incorrect. So again, you're breaking down each answer choice to define why it's right or wrong. Okay, we are in an Blackboard Ultra session. Now keep in mind that you can do this in other web conferencing tools as well, but we're going to get to the polling tools. So in Ultra, you're going to go to this purple pullout in the bottom right. You're going to go to the third over that says Share Content, and then you're going to see the polling option. Now what you can do is choose polling. You can choose multiple choice or yes, no. So maybe I say yes, no. And I can say something like, if you took a test on this topic, you would pass. And if I feel yes or if I feel no. So then you would start that. And notice that will pop up on the screen for all of the students. And then they would need to answer yes or no. So in this case, I would allow everyone to see the pop-up and read the question, and then they could provide their answer. and I'm able to see. Now, within Ultra, you are also counted in the poll, so you have to vote as well, or know that you're going to have one left over because that is going to be you that hasn't voted yet. And then if you want to show everyone the responses, you choose Show Responses. And again, you'll have a nice little graph. There's only one person in this course, and they are the only ones that answered. But you would have a nice little graph of how the class answered. Now, it doesn't tell you who answered what, so I don't know who that one person that answered yes was. But that's not the goal of this. It's to kind of get an overall viewpoint of how the class feels about it. So again, with the polling, you can come out to the side, this purple pull out, do start polling, multiple choice or true false. You can type the whole question in and type the answer choices if you want to. You could also have it displayed on the whiteboard. So if you use the whiteboard tool in Ultra, you might have the question written out on the whiteboard. So in this case, if you have it typed out on the whiteboard, you can just go to the polling area, choose multiple choice, and then not even type in a question, just have, 1, 2, 3, start that, and then they would be able to associate it. So if you want to get it up quickly, that's one way to go ahead and do it as well. And again, people can poll in and you can show the response. Another possible way to do this is to go ahead and build this on a PowerPoint slide that you upload into the course, so that when you get to that slide in the slide deck, it prompts you to say, okay, we're going to do a poll now. Go to polling, multiple choice, type in 1, 2, 3, 4. That way you don't have to type in the whole poll. It's already preset if you already know when you're going to want to do your polls and what questions you want to do. So that's one option for engaging the students, and then again walking through and saying, okay, what was the correct answer, what was the incorrect answer, and why did people choose what they chose? The next strategy we're going to talk about is using interactives within the PowerPoint or the whiteboard area. And some of the strategies that you'll see over the next couple of slides comes from this textbook by Dr. Pamela Bell. It's called A Little PDA Goes a Long Way, Strategies for Content Literacy. And so what I've done is taken these strategies and applied them to a synchronous live session so that you can do the same things that you would do in a face-to-face class, but you're doing it in an online live session. So I've built these just in a PowerPoint. So what you're seeing is just a PowerPoint. And so if I just kind of go through, basically I just used the charting tool and the text tool to create these different slides. I didn't do anything fancy with them, nothing that someone knowing the very basics of PowerPoint wouldn't be able to do. Just basically shapes, arrows, text, and sometimes table features. So what we want to do is we want to upload this into our Ultra session. So to do this in Blackboard Collaborate Ultra, and again, this tool is available, the ability to upload files is available in other web conferencing tools as well. But in Ultra, you come over to the side again, you do the purple pullout, you choose the Share Content, which is the third one over, and we're going to share files. And then I'm just going to pick that PowerPoint that I built. I'm just going to upload it into my session. Now, you might not have all these strategies uploaded into one particular PowerPoint. You might have teaching content, lecture content, and then within the lecture content have a couple of slides. Every couple of slides have an interactive piece. So you would just pick that. You would share now. You would pick the slide that you wanted to share. And then you and the students are seeing this slide. So what this particular slide does, it's called the KWL, and it's basically broken into 3 columns. The K stands for what do I already know about this topic. The W stands for what do I want to know that I didn't already learn about this topic. And then the L is what did I learn about this topic. So this is a great reflection activity to do at the end. And so you can have it to where you have the students call out. The students would say, you would ask the students, hey, what did you already know about this topic? And maybe they use their audio to turn it on and to tell you things. Maybe they use the text chat area to type in things that they already knew. Or And so with that, you could see the chat that they're the chat messages, and then that way you as the teacher could come in and grab the text tool and then add those in. You wouldn't want to type full-on sentences here. You would want to just type brief things so we know that biology involved animals. Okay, so you can add those in as the teacher yourself. Or better yet, you can make it to where the students are able to write, because remember, students are seeing this exact same screen. So students have the ability to come up and use that text tool and to type on these different slides. Now, what you don't want to do is tell your students, hey, everyone grab one of these text tool and just start writing stuff. Because if you have a lot of students in the course, 50, 60 students in the course, they're going to be writing on top of each other. So what you might want to do is have a way to randomly generate and pick somebody in the group. One solution I like to use to randomly pick a student so that they're all not typing on the slides at the same time, but I'm not always saying who would like to volunteer so that the same person volunteers over and over again, is if you just go to Google and you search in random name picker, you'll see lots of websites. So here's one of them. And what I do is I keep a file in my email or in my OneDrive or somewhere handy to me that has a listing of all of my students' first names, so I don't have to type them in every time. So at the beginning of the session, I just open a new tab outside of my Ultra session and go ahead and put the names of my students. I just copy and paste them out of that Word document that I had into this session. And then when I'm wanting to pick somebody randomly, I just click to spin it, and I'm actually, I can share my screen to let my students see this, but then it shows me and it picks the name of the student, and then that lets me know, okay, it's Marianne's turn. Marianne. Yay, so we have a winner. So Marianne, please tell me what you already knew about this topic or whatnot. So you can go ahead and fill in all these different pieces. And keep in mind that once you finish a slide, you're welcome to say, hey students, get out your phones and take a picture of this slide. It's all filled out. It's got a lot of great information on it. So that's the KWL chart. The next one is the true-false meter. You can do this at the beginning before you teach your content, at the end after you teach your content, or both. Basically what this is doing is you would build a chart and you would put in statements that you're going to teach about. And then you can put yes or no or true or false. So then you ask the students to come up to the pencil area, get a pencil, and put a check mark whether they believe that statement is true or false. So there are differences between plant cells and animal cells. I think yes. Plant cells have a nucleus while animal cells do not. I think that that is no. So in this case, it's okay to have everybody come in and get the pencil tool and write. And then what you do is total up. So maybe I have 8 people who have said yes and 10 people who have said no. I have 7 people who said yes and 5 people who said no. And that kind of gives me some aspect of what my students already know about this topic. Did they do the reading ahead of time? Because if this information was in the prior reading, then they should know it, that type of thing. And then I might bring this back up and do it at the end of the session. I might clear it off and go back to the end of the session, and at the after we've learned about the content, have them go back and do this again to see, are they getting the correct answers on the back end rather than when they first started. So that is kind of a true-false meter to see what they know, what facts they already know. The next tool is matching. So you can make 3, I just made 3 columns here, 1 for each type of war. You can make just 2, you can make more than 3 if you wanted to, but I just put 3 topics that are sort of related but not. And then down here I put just random words. So there's 2 ways to go about doing this. You can have the students do a free-for-all and everybody grab, or again you could use the name of wheels if you wanted to. And one way to do this is to have the students get the pencil and draw a line. So Lincoln goes to which of these? Lincoln would be closely associated to the American Revolution. 1914 would be closely associated to World War I because that's the year it started. Jefferson Davis is associated to the Civil War. Germany would be associated to World War I more than it would be associated to the other 2. Britain might be associated to the American Revolution, Treaty of Versailles, Allied powers, both of those would be. And so they could draw lines. Another way to do it, if you didn't want to draw lines, if you had a lot of words and you were afraid that that would get pretty messy, is to allow them to color code it. So circle the words that involve the American Revolution. Let's circle them. So we'll come in, we'll get our color orange, and we'll circle the words that we believe align to the American Revolution, versus we'll get a blue and circle the words we believe goes with World War One. And then again, at the end of this, you can look for the correct answers. You can also randomly ask the students, have them text in or just have them voice in and say, okay, well, why is Lincoln related to the American Revolution? What role did he play? What role did Britain play? What role did the Civil War play? And here you're able to see and bring up misconceptions. Oh no, Lincoln wasn't associated to the American Revolution. Let me clear that out. And we can have somebody else, or the teacher can redirect and say, actually, he's related to the Civil War because of X, Y, and Z. So you can also have it branch out. And again, the students can take pictures of this when they're finished so that they're able to see the correct answers. The next one can be played two different ways. It can be add a word is one way to play it, and guess the topic is another way to play it. Now you can have it to where I have 4 different groups on here. You could have it to where it's just one group if you wanted to have more space. So you can have the students read these words, and you can have them get the text box, and you can have everyone come in and type a word that also applies to this. So we're looking at nucleus, cytoplasm, chloroplast, and cell membrane. So what would be another word that is associated to this? Or Central Powers 1914, Franz Ferdinand. What would be another one here? So I might put Axis powers. And so that's another word associated to this. And you might have it to where each student is able to do so. If you make it larger, each student can type on there and put their words. Another way to play this game is to guess the topic. So we're looking at the students given this set of words, and they have to tell me what they have in common. So Orwell, Big Brother, all of these words, what do they have in common? Well, they are words and phrases from the book 1984. These are pieces of the plant cell. These all have to do with World War I, and these all have to do with mitosis. So they can guess the topic there. So multiple ways you can play this game, and again, you can have it where it's a free-for-all where everyone uses the type, or you can use the wheel of names to go ahead and pick somebody individually to play. Next is the mind map or the splash. So you can go about this different ways. You can have it to where it's more like brainstorming, to where you give it a topic, and then the students come in and on these different blocks type in words that define that, or different books that are similar to it. You can kind of make up what you want those qualifiers to be. Another way that you can do this is you can give specific qualifiers here. So let's say we are in a nursing course and we're talking about cancer treatment. So one block is going to be medications, one block is going to be transition plan, one group is going to be check-ins with doctor. And then another one is going to be associated doctors. And then one is going to be for tests to be run, or so and so forth. So you can break out what is going on in each one. And again, you can have it be a free-for-all where everybody gets their text box and types in, or you can use the random wheel to pick people to say, okay, let me pick somebody and I want you to fill in the meds area for what medications are common for cancer treatment. And then I'm going to pick this person and you're going to tell me what is the transition plan common for cancer treatment. So you can use this diagram multiple ways. You can change it up to fit your needs. The next one is a closed passage. You basically type out in your PowerPoint a paragraph and you leave blanks. And what I often like to do to keep everybody from writing on top of each other is I have 2 students race. So I come to my wheel of names and I spin it twice and get 2 students. Then each of those students gets their text and they pick two different colors. So maybe Joe's in red and Bob's in blue, whatever you want to do. And then they read the closed passage. When I say go, they go and type in the answers to the boxes. And we see who can finish it fastest and get the correct answer. So in this case, they would go and just fill in the pieces to make the correct answers. And once we get through, we read it as a class. We take any suggestions that need to be edited. And then I tell my students to take out their phones and to take a picture of this screen because you have a nice paragraph with correct answers filled in for you, which make a great fill in the blank, fill in the essay type question on an exam. The next option is called the main event, where you give them a list of words and they type in the importance. It might be the definition of the term. It might be why this person or this plan was important. In this case, it's World War I. Why are each of these important? What role did they play? You can edit this as much as you want to. You could even have medications and type in the side effects. You can mix it and make it fit your content as much as you want to. But in this case, you could have each person, you could assign Wheel of Names, each person one of these, or you could have them work in groups, or you could just basically just randomly let people fill them in. But here you're defining what the importance of each of these is. So who were the big four and what role did they play in World War I and why was it important? Now you can switch this up and do the exact opposite to where you give the students the importance and they have to pick the word. So I randomly pick somebody's name and I tell them, okay, you're going to figure out the word that houses the cell's chromosomes. Now what you can do is to get others involved, you can kind of do more of a Price is Right type feel to where you tell, Marianne is going to be the one actually filling this in, but other students can come to this chat area and we encourage them to type in responses so that just like with the Price is Right, the person turns around and listens to the audience. The student is able to see what other people are saying to get help or to see what other people are saying before he or she writes in their word as well. So kind of the same concept, just which way you want to go about doing it. This tool, the discussion web, is a little bit more for open-ended topics, opinion topics, discussion-related topics. So you type a discussion or a statement to be questioned here. So in this case, if Dr. Frankenstein were more accepting of his monster, then the monster wouldn't have caused as much emotional and physical havoc on the world. So then each student comes and gets their crayon or their pencil and they mark, do I believe that statement is true or do I believe that statement is false? And then perhaps you pick a random wheel and you say, okay, Marianne, if you chose true or false, come down here with the text box and type in or at least say aloud why you chose true and what is your side of the statement on that. If you picked false, what is your side of the statement on that and why? And so again, it kind of springboards a discussion about a particular topic. Another way to go a bit further with that is to do solving a problem. This is also a great template to use if you're doing case studies, which we'll get to in a minute. So here what you do is you give the students a problem. So in this case, the problem is not all students have a computer or internet to participate in virtual learning. So then the students define whose problem is it? And why is it a problem? So whose problem is it? Is it the parent's problem, the student's problem, the teacher's problem, everybody's problem? And why is it a problem? Well, if they don't have internet, they cannot do their activities. Then you come up with 3 possible solutions and you come up with pros and cons for each of those solutions. Based upon that, you then decide what is the best solution and why. And it might even be that you again let the students come and get the pencil and check mark after you define out what those solutions are, let them check, and then the best solution is the one that most people checked, and we decide why we did so. So again, this can be something that you do as a group, but this is also great if you break the students out into breakout rooms and have this area for them as a template for them to look at and to work through as they do something like a case study. The next one is helping them pick a discussion or helping them pick a topic to discuss in their breakout groups. So normally what I would do is I would just create a table and I would list topics that are related to my subject area. So this case is we're looking at issues in education. So I just made a list and numbered off different issues in education that I think are important that I want my students to discuss. So I don't show them this slide to begin with. So I have the slide hidden. And I have my students broken into their groups. And so I tell each group, decide on a number 1 through 9. So maybe, group 1 says we want number 3. Okay, great. So then I show them this, and they find the number that they chose. Of course, you can't pick a number that somebody already selected. So if they pick number 3, then their topic of the evening is teacher evaluations. So then what I do is I give them any stipulations I want to give them. I break them into the breakout groups, and they are to discuss teacher evaluations. Now, oftentimes I have a spreadsheet or a list of questions that I want them to do. What are teacher evaluations? How often are they done? What rubrics are used? How do teachers feel about them? X, Y, and Z. And they have to go through, look at the internet, and research via articles, via web links, whatever, via their textbook, and define out those different pieces. Then we come back together as a whole, and I spend about 5 minutes on each topic. So we would start with whoever had number 1, whatever group had number 1, and they tell us and go through very quickly, what is flexible seating, why is it important, why is it a big deal, what do people say about it, X, Y, and Z. So by the end of the session, we've learned about 9 different topics, while they only had to go in depth and research one of them, but they got the gist and the understanding of 9 different topics right within the course. The next one is the classic flowchart, which you can set up ahead of time using PowerPoint, just using shapes and arrows. And then again, you can come in and write in the steps, or if you don't want to write in the steps as the students tell you, you can use your wheel of names to assign somebody to fill in the different ones. You can say so-and-so is going to do step 1, so-and-so is going to do step 2, etc. And have them go through and fill out the process. Again, lots of things you can do with this. Flow charts, process, timelines, pretty much any subject area can fit into this particular model. And lastly, we have the choice wheel. This is great for another type of discussion as well. So what you would do in this case is you would have a discussion question. So say that we're teaching an education class, and we have a statement that there is a student in the class that is being disruptive. What do you do? And then I have a choice wheel. I have first choice, second choice. I have 4 different choices that they can choose from. So what I then do is I come and start a poll. So I come to my share content, I do a poll, I do multiple choice, and I type in 1, 2, 3, and 4. And I start that as a choice. And then the students pick which of these choices they would choose if they were the teacher. So maybe in this case, this student would choose number 3. So then I show all the responses, and we're able to see as a class what most people said. So most people maybe said number 3. So then we talk about why most people picked number 3. Then I ask the people who picked number 3, okay, what is your rationale for that? Why would you say stop the class immediately and address it? What are the pros of that? What are the cons of that? What are the implications of that? And it might be that someone who picked 3 thinks this is the best reason of all, but then somebody else who didn't pick 3 says, well, think about it like this. What if this happens? So that kind of starts the discussion back and forth of which choice is the best. Then once we've had a good discussion, you can actually close this out and go ahead and restart that poll if you want to, and have them vote again after we've had a discussion about it, and allow the students to vote again and see, do they pick the same choice or do they pick a different choice? Does the leading choice change based upon what we've already discussed? And again, so these are just some common, easy strategies that you can use that do not take a lot of setup, that you can use to kind of facilitate interactions with your students. The last thing that we're going to talk about is the option of using breakout groups. Now, breakout groups basically allow you to take a whole class that is in your live session and break them into smaller groups. It is literally equivalent of taking 20 students in your classroom and breaking them into groups of 2 or groups of 3, and each of them going to their own area in the classroom to discuss a topic. You basically have one session and you break your students up into those smaller groups and you have them go and do something. So here's my suggestion for developing and setting out your breakout groups. So the first step is you want to decide what the students are going to be doing in their breakout group. So in this case, I'm going to have case studies that I want them to read those case studies and discuss in their groups. So for the second step is I want to collect the materials that they will need for that case study. So I go out and get PDFs of different case studies. So say I'm going to have 4 groups, I have 4 different case studies. And I go ahead and upload those into my LMS several days before the live meeting. I also, in the meantime, while I'm doing that, I want to develop some type of activity that my students are to do with their breakout group. So again, it might be a set of questions that they discuss while they have about their case study. It might be the what is the problem chart that I showed a little earlier, where they have to define what the problem is and possible solutions. Now, some people might choose to post this ahead of time so that the students can read each of the case studies as well as look at the possible questions and template that they're going to be looking at to kind of start their thoughts. Some people prefer to only let them look at the case studies and just give them that activity, that template, the day of, so that they don't pre-think all of their ideas. Then you want to make sure to instruct students to read all the case studies, and this is very important. They need to read all the case studies even though they're only going to discuss one, and there's 2 reasons for doing that. Number 1, when you put students in the breakout rooms, you're going to do so randomly. So you can't define ahead of time who's going to go in what group. You can manually make make groups in Blackboard Collaborate Ultra, but if you have a large set, you're going to be manually putting 60 people into each group that they go in. So it's much easier to just let it randomly put them in groups. But having said that, the student won't know which group they're going to be in to know which case study to read. So it's important that they read all of them. Also, at the end of the session, you're probably going to come back as a group and have each of them discuss those case studies. Well, the student, if I was in group B, the case study in group A, when the students are talking about it with the rest of the class, it's not going to make much sense to me if I hadn't already read that case study. So they want to make sure that they have read all of them to be able to have those ending discussions. So when you get into the live session, you're going to use the random selector to put them into groups, and then you're going to let them know ahead of time which group is discussing which case study. So I would label it in my LMS, case study 1, group 1, case study 2, group 2. So if I get randomly put into group 4, I know that I'm discussing group 4 case study. So they know which one to look at. So once you give them time to talk in their breakout rooms, either answer the questions, fill out a template, a chart of some kind, once they do all that, you want to come back into the main room and you want to go through each of those case studies. So you want to pull up the template or pull up the set of questions and say, okay, group 1, tell me about this. Answer these questions for me or show me what your chart looked like. And that's for the benefit of the students who weren't in that group, but it's also benefit for the recording because Ultra is only recording what's in the main room, not the breakout rooms. So if whatever happens in the breakout room is not going to get recorded, you want to make sure you reflect and reiterate when you come back as a group. And then also it allows the non-group members to chime in. So I read case study 3, and even though I wasn't part of the discussion in class, I still might have picked up something that is worth speaking about. So that's the process you want to use for doing the breakout groups. So now I'm going to show you what it looks like in the LMS and in Ultra. So in the course ahead of time in the LMS, I would go to the content area and make a folder for case study materials and post in each of the articles. So group 1 case study, group 2 case study, group 3 case study. But maybe make sure to reiterate to your students that they have to read all 3 case studies because they don't know what group they're going to be in. And then you have this file that are going to be questions for all the case studies. So they're going to use these questions to guide them. Again, you may or may not choose to release this to them depending on if you want them to have those questions ahead of time. So you want to make sure that this is nice and secure in your D2L course ahead of time, several days before your meeting live. So when you're live in your session, to create your breakout groups, you're going to come over to the right side, use the purple pullout, use the share content area, and then go to breakout groups. Now, if you have more than 5 people in the course, which in most cases you will, you'll be able to choose this drop down and do random assignment. That would randomly put these students in the groups. As of right now, I only have 2 people in the group, so it's not allowing me to do the random assignments. Now, right now I have 2 groups by default. It might be that I want to add one more group and one more group to have 4 groups total. Then when I randomize them, Ultra is going to randomly put each student into the groups and kind of have them as even as possible. Now, if I want to manually move people around, I can grab their name and move them into whatever group I want them to go into. Then I choose Start, and it's going to move my students into those groups. So then what I can do is I can see who's in each group, but I can also come in and move myself around to go in and check on my students. So I can come in beside my name and I can move myself to another group, and I can move myself into group 1. And then I can update, and that moves me into group 1 to where I can talk to the students in group 1, see what they're doing, see how they're answering their questions, because in their group they have the ability to use the whiteboard, the share the screen, the share the files, all those different things. So they might be working on their whiteboard, writing out the questions or laying out the answers to their prompts. And if I want to, I can come right here to Breakout Groups, and I can then move myself into group 2 and come and check on group 2 and update myself, and then go and look at group 2 and see how they're getting along. So once I've given everybody time, I can end the breakout groups by pressing this stop button, and that's going to return everybody to the main room. From there, that's when I have the discussion of pulling up the template again, pulling up the questions, and then saying, okay, group 1, tell me about your case study. Tell me what happened, why it's important, what the problem was, what are the 3 solutions, X, Y, and Z. Keeping in mind that this is going to be recorded. If you've started the recording, this whole group is going to be recorded. And that also allows the others to chime in. So in the course ahead of time in the LMS, I would go to the content area and make a folder for case study materials and post in each of the articles. So group 1 case study, group 2 case study, group 3 case study. But maybe make sure to reiterate to your students that they have to read all 3 case studies because they don't know what group they're going to be in. And then you have this file that are going to be questions for all the case studies. So they're going to use these questions to guide them. Again, you may or may not choose to release this to them depending on if you want them to have those questions ahead of time. So you want to make sure that this is nice and secure in your D2L course ahead of time, several days before you're meeting live. So when you're live in your session, to create your breakout groups, you're going to come over to the right side, use the purple pullout, use the share content area, and then go to breakout groups. Now, if you have more than 5 people in the course, which in most cases you will, you'll be able to choose this drop down and do random assignment. That would randomly put these students in the groups. As of right now, I only have 2 people in the group, so it's not allowing me to do the random assignments. Now, right now I have 2 groups by default. It might be that I want to add one more group and one more group to have 4 groups total. Then when I randomize them, Ultra is going to randomly put each student into the groups and kind of have them as even as possible. Now, if I want to manually move people around, I can grab their name and move them into whatever group I want them to go into. Then I choose Start, and it's going to move my students into those groups. So then what I can do is I can see who's in each group, but I can also come in and move myself around to go in and check on my students. So I can come in beside my name and I can move myself to another group, and I can move myself into group 1. And then I can update, and that moves me into group 1 to where I can talk to the students in group 1, see what they're doing, see how they're answering their questions, because in their group they have the ability to use the whiteboard, the share the screen, the share the files, all those different things. So they might be working on their whiteboard, writing out the questions or laying out the answers to their prompts. And if I want to, I can come right here to Breakout Groups, and I can then move myself into group 2 and come and check on group 2 and update myself, and then go and look at group 2 and see how they're getting along. So once I've given everybody time, I can end the breakout groups by pressing this stop button, and that's going to return everybody to the main room. From there, that's when I have the discussion of pulling up the template again, pulling up the questions, and then saying, okay, group one, tell me about your case study. Tell me what happened, why it's important, what the problem was, what are the three solutions, X, Y, and Z. Keeping in mind that this is going to be recorded. If you started the recording, this whole group is going to be recorded. And that also allows the others to chime in.